Hello, everyone, and inside the latest Locked On Canadiens, can Ivan Demidov come over from Russia early? And is Filip Mesar on the move?
You're Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 1110 of Locked On Canadiens. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Just download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Some terms do apply. We are, of course, your daily Montreal Canadiens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you get your team every single day of the week, wherever you listen to your daily podcast on Google, Apple, Spotify, or here on YouTube.com as well. I am one of your hosts. I am Scott Matlin. I'm joined, as always, by the active stick, Laura Saba. And Laura, it is Friday, which means the Friday mailbag, and we have a ton to get into in terms of listener questions and things that have happened. But have you also survived what's remained of Hurricane Beryl bowling through the Northeast at this point?
So it actually hit you in Toronto much harder than it hit us. Like, we had warnings from last week about winds and rains. I ended up staying home today, but a lot of my coworkers who went to work said the commute wasn't even that bad. So I got lucky, but I know you lost power, and there were tornadoes touching down in your region.
Yeah, not great. And also, this is going to be a slight Twitter rant here because if only the moron who bought that website made it easy to see, hey, what's going on when I click on a trending topic related to literal funnels of high winds coming out of the sky and destroying things. Thankfully, all good. Family near where one of the touchdown areas were is fine. We were fine here in the city, but I got back a little early just in case we had to bunker down. But you're not here to listen to me talk about almost being in a tornado again. We're here to talk about the Montreal Canadiens. And the biggest thing I think on everyone's mind, besides waiting for extensions to kick in, is Ivan Demidov. And how, with everything going on with the Flyers and the KHL, there's a lot of confusion about what can and can't happen, and that the KHL has separated itself from, if I am understanding everything correctly here, has separated themselves from the IIHF and wants to operate independently of that in terms of like negotiating contracts and things that are tied into that. And a lot of Habs fans have immediately clicked into their brain, oh, so we can just buy out his deal like Philadelphia did, Ivan Demidov, and bring him over to the NHL this year. And in theory, technically, yes, you can always, the player can always buy out their deal, but I also don't think that's what Kent Hughes is going to do, not because he doesn't want this player here, but because he's seemingly playing, I don't want to say the long game because it's just a year, but playing the smart game with this, especially with three more prospects actually in the KHL, and the Canadiens not showing an adverse reaction to drafting from there. They're trying to not step on toes. I'm not off base with anything there, am I, Laura?
Not at all. And I think, there's a lot of wishful thinking here. And yes, but to me, it's not the end of the world if he stays over there for one more year. You know what I mean? Like, and I understand everybody's examining the intricacies and if this is possible or not. And I also completely understand why we're doing this, right? We're so excited about this prospect. But I think, like, it feels like when there are things like, oh, there's a tool to be used, like an offer sheet, and GMs don't use it. This is kind of, it's not like that in that it's not cowardice. It's more being prudent, right? Like there's a possibility, but why are you going to engender that bad will, if that makes sense?
Yeah, and that's the thing for me is that I would absolutely love to have Ivan Demidov in. I assume he would probably go to the AHL to start this season here. I would adore that. I would love that opportunity to be here. But also, we don't know what league he's going to be playing in next year. Everyone seems to, and this may be years of Canadiens fan jadedness, and myself included in that, being, hey, maybe he's going to the MHL. Maybe we just got to go rescue him and bring him over. I don't think the Canadiens, and Kent Hughes being a player agent, I do not think are in the business of doing things that, like you said, are going to upset the balance in a certain way. They've got a goaltender they really like that they invited his goalie coach to development camp. They just used another pick on an overage forward there in Makar Kanan. They have Bogdan Kuniushkov, who they really seem to like a lot in this. And then obviously you have Ivan Demidov. And every year there are players from Russia that get overlooked because teams still take stock of Russian factor or whatever and things, which is complete and utter nonsense and something we can talk with scouting experts about in the future. I have no doubt that if the Canadiens wanted to, they could structure a deal that would pay Demidov the money that he would have to pay to leave his KHL contract. But I think the Canadiens this year are very happy with the setting of the pace that they are on. They could absolutely, because the whole the Michkov thing, Ivan Fedotov, all of that was messy. I still don't know how they got Michkov over here out of his contract when he has to pay his own way. And the amount of money in that is more than he was getting in any sort of bonus. There's a lot of things with that make me think that this was probably not well received on the KHL side of things. And it's when you're losing young star players to other teams, you're going to upset somebody in that. And before I get radioed or people think that I'm hating on the idea of this, I would love this player here, but this is the last year I think that they are going to be bad, so to speak. Even if they improve on last year, they don't need to bring someone into that environment right now. He's going to come over at the end of the year. He will probably play NHL games at the end of this season. When his KHL, MHL, whatever season is done and over with, you will see Ivan Demidov in a Canadiens uniform in the lineup. That I can very likely assure you. And Ken Hughes sticks to his guns above anything else in this whole rebuild with the way he's dealt with free agents and dealing with trades and everything else. He's been dialed in. To deviate that wildly from what the established plan looks like, it just seems very un-Kent Hughes-like overall.
Always on mute. Always on mute. Sorry about that. And I did talk about this in yesterday's episode in terms of where they're going to end up at the end of this season. And for me, it's not worth it to use him at that point, right? Like I talked about how we're expecting them to challenge for a wild card, but maybe finish just outside looking in, right? So it's not worth it at this point. Like the risk / cost / blah, 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 it doesn't make sense. That's all I'm going to say. It's not the right time.
And that's the thing is that if this was, let's say next year, not this upcoming season, the 25-26 season when the Canadiens want to be pushing for a playoff spot, absolutely then it kind of makes a little more sense to be like, we should really add this top piece into the lineup here. At this moment, it's just not what the case is. And the Canadiens have shown time and time again from top to bottom, even when Marc Bergevin was here, not dragging them out until their contracts were done and over with. Like with Alexander Romanov, he was coming from CSKA Moscow. He was playing regularly. It's going to cost a lot to kind of, jury rig a guy out of there a little bit. With someone like Ivan Demidov, this is a potential superstar player in the KHL who already says he doesn't want to stay. You're not going to just go in and be like, here is $30. And well, you might based on the way the ruble has inflated, but that's not the point. Is you're not just going to snap your fingers and have these things happen. It's so much more nuanced to it. And I think people are kind of overreading it and just assuming the Canadiens, being one of the most famous hockey teams in the world, have impunity to act as they want. That's not the truth in anything, is that I understand the well wishes, and likely it does maybe curry some favor if you've been on good terms with this KHL club or the league beforehand. But it's not as simple as just snapping your fingers like you're ordering something at McDonald's. You can't just get your way because you pressed it on a screen. Of course, now that I've said this, we're going to find out he's getting signed to an entry-level deal, and we'll be over here for training camp in a month because that's how this show works. But it is Friday. We have a ton in the Friday mailbag, which you can always tweet us at LO_Canadiens, LockedOnCanadiens at gmail.com. However, the big thing is, and this came up just before the show, is Filip Mesar on the move for Rutger McGroarty? We're going to talk about the articles surrounding that and more coming up next. But first, it is baseball season. It is summertime. And you know what the best part of summer is? It's going to the ballpark, getting something cold to drink, getting a hot dog, watching some guy trying to catch a foul ball and tripping over himself and dropping nachos on his kid. It's always funny. But just the crack of the bat and the smell of a baseball stadium cannot be beat. And with Game Time, it's going to take all the stress out of buying tickets for your favorite Major League team because they are the authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. And prices on the Game Time app go down closer to first pitch. They have killer last minute deals, all in price and the views from your seat and the lowest price guarantee. Game Time will take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. It's so good that if you want to go to a stadium last minute, you can see the view directly from your seat, and the price that you see is the price that you will pay. And they have the lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So take all the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Just download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Some terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. We are back here at Locked On Canadiens, and we had some interesting news kind of cross the timeline here, and I want to thank the Habs on Reddit, the Habs subreddit Twitter account for pointing this out to me. This is an article that comes from Slovakia that is mentioning that the Canadiens have started making inroads potentially towards a Rutger McGroarty trade, something we kind of already knew, but this one put actual names and pricing to that, saying the Canadiens have offered Filip Mesar a 2025 first-round pick and one of Justin Barron or Jordan Harris in a trade for Rutger McGroarty. And before we dive into some of the other details that are inside that make me a little bit more skeptical, Laura, what's your initial thought on that package in the trade for McGroarty?
Again, we aren't sure that this is what's actually happening, but I understand why. And I don't think the Canadiens are necessarily giving up on Filip Mesar. They're offering him up as a trade chip here. Like that's, they're trying to get something and they're trying to give value to get that. So personally, like, I don't know. Every time we talk about Rutger McGroarty, like the opinions are wide and varied as don't give up too much or you're not giving up enough, right? So for me, like that is kind of a hefty package. So it really depends on whether you have faith in him to pan out and go in the direction that you want him to and obtain his ceiling or attain his ceiling. Sorry, it's late. It's Friday. So again, like it just to me, it feels like the market set that rumor.
Yeah, and here's the thing is, I'm not opposed to that deal. It kind of makes sense for what the Jets might be looking for and need. However, looking in a little bit deeply, Mark Dumont, obviously a friend of the show, pointed out the Canadiens generally don't leak things like this out of their camp, let alone things involving top prospects. Like the Romanov trade came out of nowhere. The Alex Newhook trade came out of nowhere. Some of these extensions have come out of nowhere. The idea is that this likely came from either Winnipeg or the oddest thing here from the Slovak side, and I'll touch on that in a second here. My first thought is I'm not opposed to this. I would potentially prefer Barron going. He can be reunited with his brother. He might also bring down the price of that first round pick into a second, or maybe it's not even Filip Mesar at that point, because I think Barron has a higher ceiling than Jordan Harris does as an NHL player, but I think Jordan Harris's floor is much, much higher than Justin Barron's at this point. At this point, that can always change, which, okay, not the worst thing I've heard for Rutger McGroarty, who could very easily slot in probably tomorrow as a middle six winger on this team, top six potential in that. As Mark Dumont put out here, and Nathan at Eyes on the Prize is also reading this, it comes off like a hit piece on Filip Mesar over everything else from the Slovak media source. He's at the bottom of the team's prospect pool, which I don't think is true, that he's openly revolting against Kent Hughes, which is very weird considering they very promptly signed Filip Mesar to an entry-level contract. and, allowed him to play in the OHL and everything with that.
And he
And that
hasn't
he's
said anything. Like, that's the thing. Like, Filip Mesar isn't out there like making veiled comments about Kent Hughes.
Yeah, and unless he said something directly to someone in the media or back in Slovakia, like I don't know where this is coming from, that he's dogging on his teammates. Like, I don't think that's true. If anything, you would think that his best friend, Juraj Slafkovsky, breaking out this season and securing a hell of a contract and setting like a new standard for Slovak hockey in the NHL would inspire him to work harder. A lot of this comes off as a very weird burial of a prospect who hasn't played an NHL game and has played all of like 3 AHL games. Something here
is not adding up.
No, the math is not mathing at all with this. Again, as a trade package, it's not the worst thing I've seen, but honestly, it doesn't make a lot of sense that I don't get why they're trying to bury this prospect in there unless he like truly does not want to be there anymore.
Right. And that's the thing too, is that like we haven't heard anything from him even last year when we expected him to go to the AHL, but instead he was sent to the OHL. He still was very good natured about it. We haven't heard complaints. There aren't like these pointed passive aggressive comments, et cetera, et cetera. And I personally think he's doing his best. It's not like he's like slacking off, et cetera. And we talked so much last year about him not being surrounded by the right types of people. I don't think that he's doing that. I don't necessarily think that it's wrong that they give him up because they have a lot of prospects and they don't have specifically well, now with Demidov they do have that, but you know what I mean? Like they have a lot of people that could that are you could sacrifice one for the sake of the other, right? And you could get value for them. So I don't think necessarily, the Canadiens have given up on him or he's rebelling against them, et cetera, et cetera. Like I just think that this is a potential idea that someone had that this could be a package and maybe he does need a change of scenery, et cetera, and they turn it into a whole thing.
Yeah, and I'm just, for the people who are like, well, he's not playing well enough. Since he's come over to North America to play in the junior leagues, he's played 3 games with the Rocket. He has 1 assist in those 3 games. There's nothing to be gleaned from that. I thought he could have stuck in the AHL last year just fine, but they wanted him to go back to junior. That's fine. 51 points in 52 games on a flawed Kitchener Ranger team with 4 points in 9 playoff games and then 6 points in 5 World Junior games. Pretty good. This year, 52 points in 45 games with the Rangers, was injured for part of that, put up 16 points in 10 playoff games for the Rangers, 9 points in 5 World Juniors games. He's playing good hockey, so I do not understand the rush to just give up on a potentially high-skilled player. Yes, he seems very boom or bust, that his floor may not be as high, but his ceiling is. It's very hard because right after them is 2 of the prospects that everyone in this fan base loves, in Owen Beck and Lane Hudson. That is not shade to them, but their immediate success on a lot of different levels is being applied to Mesar, and it's not quite clicking at the same pace. I don't know if this is the actual trade there. I don't think they're going to move Joshua. I don't think they're going to move Owen Beck, and I definitely think they're not going to move some of these defensive prospects here. That does kind of leave him as an odd man out, so it becomes a process of elimination thing. We'll keep an eye on this. Sooner or later, some of these trades that we were told about, Line and Zegras and Ehlers and McGroarty and are going to come to a head once the summer has fully smoothed out here. We'll see what becomes of that, but it is the Friday mailbag, so we have some listener questions that we want to get into, and we're going to jump into all of that coming up next. We are back here at Locked On Canadiens, your daily Montreal Canadiens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you get your team every single day of the week. If you missed my tweet, the Hot Ones hot sauces have been ordered for July. We haven't set a full date for that yet, but one of my last appearances on this show will be doing Hot Ones live again. Yes, I will address my enemies, as it so says. So, as always, if you do have more mailbag questions, you can tweet us at LO_Canadiens, LockedOnCanadiens@gmail.com. If you have a longer question, Laura, where are we in the mailbag today?
So we've got a question by email from Rob S. Draft capital. Question: is it more important to trade for an experienced veteran to help help bring the younger players along, or to trade for an impact top six forward to help them make the playoffs? We have 2 first-round and 2 second-round picks at next year's draft. How many of these should we keep versus include in a trade package? What level player might be available for 2025 first-rounders? Thanks, Rob, Habs fan in Toronto. We do exist. I know. I am so proud that whenever I go to Toronto and I see so many Habs fans just being visible and just being annoying, please continue to do that.
Immediately trade for the higher upside player. Because here's the thing about this team is that you have guys who started very young when Kent Hughes took over. I'm looking at these Suzukis and some of these guys on defense that in a perfect world, they are taking over as your veterans. Nick Suzuki is going to be 25 this year. He's not some 19-year-old kid stepping into the lineup now. He is your captain. He is your leader. You still have guys like Brendan Gallagher on this team. You have Mike Matheson. You have even a goaltender in Samuel Montembeault who's been around a while, but guys like he and Caulfield are going to step up. Kirby Dach is going to step up. Caden Gooley is going to step up. Arbor Jacki will hopefully step up into these roles that they are your guidance there. If you can give them a weapon that makes them a playoff team, you do that rather than just signing character. Character is great when character and skill fits what you want. Making it your whole thing sends you back to being Marc Bergevin, if that makes sense. I know that this group places a lot of priority on character, but it feels like a different level of that, being a good teammate, being part of the team, pulling the rope in the same way sort of thing. I absolutely would trade for an impact piece over a veteran to help with the transition, because you have guys who have been through this now that you were relying on to do that with them. In terms of players, I guess it's going to depend on which teams limp out of the gate this year too. If a team like Pittsburgh comes out of the gate and stumbles over their own stupid webbed feet, what do you do with Sidney Crosby? What do you do with Evgeny Malkin? Like, trading both of them gets Kyle Dubas fired probably, which would be very funny because they're your biggest trade assets. But I think that it all depends on where teams start this year. If there's a team that was supposed to be better again and stumbles out of the block, that's when you start knocking at their door and going, hey, you look like you might be rebuilding soon. Do you want these bright, shiny first-round picks and take one of their pieces there? It's too early to say. Training camp hasn't started. Injuries haven't set in. We haven't seen which players have lost a step, gained a step, whatever.
Also, we don't know how the Habs are going to do, right? Like, I think it's also very dependent. Like, if the Habs also, like, fall flat on their face out of the gate and there's a possibility of another top 10 pick, you know what I mean? Like, you keep that.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. I don't trade the Habs pick, but I might trade that Flames pick for sure. So,
or how the Flames do. Like, it depends on like what that pick is supposed to look like, right? Because I believe that the Flames pick is top 10 protected, or was that just the Florida one?
No, the Flames pick is top 10 protected, but we get the lower of the. If it is top 10 protected, we're getting the Florida pick. But if it is not in the top 10, we will get the Flames pick no matter what, because it is the higher of the two picks there.
Got it. All right. Next question comes from Jordan R., one of the brothers. With the recent news of Jessica Campbell breaking the glass ceiling and becoming Seattle's assistant coach, it got me thinking of who the Habs may look at in the future. Do you think after MPP's decorated playing career, we could see her take the next step from player development to coaching? If not MPP, what female coach would you like to see in the Bleu Blanc Rouge? So I think with Marie-Philippe Poulin, she is a veteran at this point. She's got probably a few more tournaments and a couple seasons left in her. It really depends on what she wants to do, right? Like, as MPP, you kind of have that luxury. Is if you say to a team or an organization, I want to learn how to coach, they'll put you on the bench in a lower league. If she goes to a league and says, I want to become an executive, right? Her league or this league, right? They will put her on track. If she wants to continue in player development, that's where they'll put her, right? Like, the world is kind of her oyster. I think the players respect her a lot. I don't know how she is as a tactician, and I think it would be exciting to see how she does on that front in terms of like motivation, development, tips, mentorship. They all seem to speak really highly of her. since she's joined the Habs. But I think like it does seem like a no-brainer. But at the same time, I don't feel like we should close the door to other coaching minds just because she would be the most obvious candidate.
I think Marie-Philippe Poulin is always going to be at the front of people's minds given her playing career fully. I think she's fantastic in her player development role right now too, in that there's not a rush to move her somewhere that might not fit her strong suit, which my first thought for a person I would put behind the bench is Caroline Ouellette, who also played with Marie-Philippe Poulin in the now defunct CWHL. She's been a coach at, I
Also a
believe it,
gold medal.
yeah. Anyways, that she's been coaching at, I believe it's Concordia, where they've had a very successful program in that she has I don't want to say the CV to back it up, but has been in that role already is the first person that popped into my mind when I heard this. Of course, Marie-Philippe Poulin is always going to be in there, but right now, I don't want to think about the end of that playing career, even as America's greatest rival. There's so much that she has done that I
Lots
don't
of
want
gold
to think
medals.
about the women's hockey world without Marie-Philippe Poulin, just because she has been such a superstar. And yes, there are so many good people coming up, but this is like that, the generation we grew up watching as kids starting to retire, the Sakicks, the Isermans, the Lidstroms, etc. That's going to be that when the Knights and the Marie-Philippe Poulins, etc., start to retire in that.
Yeah, and a couple of them have already started talking about retirement or announced their retirement, and I'm just like, I'm not ready. And then we've got some questions on the Twitter app that let you down yesterday when you were trying to stay alive. And let me just pull them up in a sec. I should have been ready with this, but I just got so caught up in the Marie-Philippe Poulin question. All right. If you were an NHL GM or a head amateur scout, what would be the top trait that you're looking for in a prospect? For example, hockey IQ, shots, skating, etc.
Ooh, here's the thing is physical traits are always good. You can always train someone though to be a better skater, to be a better shooter, to be a better positional player. Being able to think the game at a certain level is what separates players at the next level. Except like there are truly some physically gifted freaks who can do whatever they want. But I look at Sidney Crosby. Sidney Crosby is insanely talented at everything he does. And a lot of that starts because everything is up here, where he needs to be on the ice, where his opponents are, where his teammates are, the things that he does. And I
The
look at
anticipation.
that goal that he scored against the Canadiens a few years ago, where he's just passing by and he knows the puck's going to be, saved, and he's just there to just like backhand swing that in. He knows every little bit of where he needs to be and what he needs to do. It's so hard to teach everything up here. Some players are just gifted at another level with that they know how to cut angles and how to take this route or what this player is going to do. It is hockey IQ is so important to me because if you know what your opponent's going to do, you're already a step ahead of them if they're not prepared for you on that. You can train speed, you can train power, you can train shooting, you can train skating. You can't always train the mental aspect of the game, or at least not as easily as you can those other things. You can teach someone positioning, but you can't teach them how to always anticipate what someone's going to do or how to read things in a snap instant like you can with power skating lessons or lifting or shooter tutors or anything like that. Hockey IQ is always going to be at the top of my list.
And I think that's exactly it, is they have to have that vision and they have to have that ability to think the game. And it's not to say a player who doesn't actually have skating ability or hands would win out over one who has those skills. It's just that in addition to those skills, like what you do with those skills is what matters. Like how you build upon that, how you complement them with your vision, your speed, your again, like Nick Suzuki thinking two plays ahead, et cetera, et cetera. Final question of the week. And a reminder that if you want to send us mailbag questions, lockedoncanadiens@gmail.com, leave them in the YouTube comments or send them to us at LO_Canadiens on Twitter. Also, some of you can DM them to me on Instagram like you've been doing in the past. Randy Hansen asks, what is the smell of summer for you? Is it campfire charcoal, barbecue, a campfire, charcoal barbecue, fireworks? What's the smell of summer for you? And we don't live in New York City, so the smell of summer for us is not pee.
The smell of summer is always going to be fresh cut grass. It's hard to beat that, but also just like the first like smell of like something on the grill, not even just the charcoal, like that smell of burger, chicken, corn roasting on the grill, anything like that. Carly and I, our friend, is having a big, barbecue on Sunday, and he does it once a year. It's our favorite time of the year. We come home with like 12 containers of leftovers. That smell is like ingrained in my nose. Is my favorite thing in the world. It can't be beaten. Also, just an ice cold root beer. I know it's the oldest thing I've ever said, but yes.
Yes, that's a very grandpa thing. For me, it's I am very fortunate in that I don't have a pool, but I have access to a pool. And just like when the pool gets cleaned and filled up and then you can kind of smell the chlorine while sitting next to it, you're kind of like, oh, summer's here. And I really, really like that. Also, orange popsicles.
Yes. Remember, if you want to tweet us your mailbag questions, you can tweet us at LO_Canadiens, lockedOnCanadiens@gmail.com. Follow Laura at The Active Stick. Follow myself at Scott Matla. We will be back with an episode on Monday morning for you all, depending on what happens this weekend. We've got the AHL schedules out. We can talk about that. We've got so much more to get into, we promise. But until then, we will see you all next time.